Thank you for being here this morning. Javier Becerra, Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, joined by our leader, Nancy Pelosi, and our Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley. We just finished the session where obviously we discussed the legislative calendars activities for this week. We also had an opportunity to hear from Neil Eggleston, the President's Counsel, on the proposal that has been submitted by the White House and the President to Congress for authorization to use military force as we try to dismantle and destroy ISIL. And so we spent a lot of time discussing that with Mr. Eggleston. Clearly, it's an important issue that we're going to be taking up over the next several days, along with other important matters. We still have to make sure our homeland security is protected by making sure we fund all those who take care of us here at home. And we're hoping that our Republican colleagues will put forward a proposal that can become law so we don't find a shutdown of the most important agency when it comes to protecting our security here at home. And so there are a number of things we have to deal with. We're hoping that our colleagues on the Republican side will, here in the House and also in the Senate, will take action soon, because it's time for us to govern, whether it's the pressing issues in the Middle East or the pressing issues here at home. We have things to do. Americans expect us to get to work because they still want to see us get back to the job of building more jobs for Americans throughout the country. With that, let me yield now to our leader, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chairman Crowley. As you mentioned, the Homeland Security appropriation is an important matter that has not been sufficiently dealt with in the House of Representatives. We take an oath to support and protect the American people, the Constitution of the United States. Homeland Security is that vehicle. Homeland Security Department is that vehicle. We have 17 days until the expiration of what was they called, the Cromnibus, the short-term funding of Homeland Security legislation. Only 6 of those days are legislative days. We have the leader on the Republican side saying, why do we have to do anything when Mitch McConnell in the Senate says it's up to the House? But still, House Republicans refuse to acknowledge the fact that we must pass an appropriations bill to fund Homeland Security. As I've said to you before, we should have passed this in December and removed all doubt that we could move forward in a very strong way to protect the American people. The Republican leadership, the Speaker at that time said, well, let's just do it after the new Congress comes in. That was December. The new Congress comes in January. In January, Je suis Charlie swept the world. Everybody in the world was concerned about Homeland Security in each person's country, certainly we and ours. Everybody except the hermetically sealed chamber of the House of Representatives, where there still is a refusal to accept the fact that we must fund Homeland Security Department in order to protect the American people in the best possible way. And why are they doing this? They're doing this because they object to the president exercising his constitutional authority to protect immigrants in our country. Ronald Reagan did so. George Herbert Walker Bush did so. President Clinton did so. President George W. Bush did so. And that was okay. But when President Obama moved to use executive action to protect people in our country, they said no, and not only no, but we're not going to pass Homeland Security. They're holding the protection and safety of the American people hostage to their opposition to any action the president may take on immigration. So in any event, we find ourselves in a situation where we have to make sure the American people understand what is at risk here. Even the Republicans in the Senate are saying it's up to the House, but the House refuses to assume its responsibility. As our chairman said, we also this morning talked in the interest of our national security, talked about the authorization for the use of military force. That will be an ongoing debate as our members express their views. We're pleased that the administration put forth a resolution, and we'll see what comments come from that. We hope to have bipartisan support for something that would limit the power of the president, but nonetheless protect the American people in a very strong way. With that, I'm pleased to yield to our Vice Chair, Mr. Crowley.
Thank you, Madam Leader. As the leader said, Leader McCarthy has said, why do we have to do anything? The reason you have to do something is because when you win the majority, you're in charge of the House of Representatives. It's your responsibility to put forth legislation to protect the homeland. Without this legislation, and if it's set to expire once again at the end of this month, we leave in jeopardy the security of our nation. That alone is reason enough for them to have to act. It's their responsibility to act to protect the American people. After 9/11, after the threats that we have sustained over the last decade and a half since 9/11, we know there have been many. It's the responsibility of Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, to protect the American people here in the United States. And the suspension of that, again, the false or these made-up deadlines, leading the American people once again to the brink, is something the American people are tired of. They don't want to see their safety threatened or questioned because of political gamesmanship. If the Republicans don't like what the president had to do in terms of executive order, they have the opportunity, they have continued to have the opportunity to bring up their own bill on immigration, yet they fail to do that. That once again, an abrogation of their own authority that they have, that they fail to act on. On the AUMF, I'm also pleased that the president has brought forth a proposal. It's now up to the Congress to deliberate and to discuss this issue further. And I think there's some healthy skepticism within our caucus. Yet I think is also pleased that the president has brought this limiting AUMF before. That's the first time in the history that I've been here in the House, we actually have a president who has asked for a limitation on their ability to conduct operations overseas. So I look forward to this debate within our caucus and then further in a bipartisan way on the floor of the House of Representatives and between both the Senate and the House to move forward on this issue. And with that, I'll yield it back to the chairman.
Questions?
Madam Leader, a question on the AUMF, if you don't mind for that. We've heard from some Republicans that
There you go.
I did it on purpose. I hope not. I hope the scenario you described is just anecdotal because it's very dangerous. The fact is the president is the president of the United States. The other fact is that ISIL poses a threat to security in that region, and it must be stopped. In the Middle East and beyond, actually, the Levant, that's the L, and they must be stopped. The president is asking for a limitation on the power that the president does have under Article 2 and of previous authorizations that have gone forth. He's saying, let's limit this. Let's limit in terms of time and in terms of scope. And so I would hope that we could have a thoughtful conversation about what is right for the American people without them getting into their we don't trust the president mode. I don't know if that speaks for most of the Republicans, and I don't know who you're referencing, but it's very irresponsible, whoever it may be. Our members of our caucus have questions, as do I, about what does this language actually mean, because we're seeing it for the first time now. And I think that's a healthy debate, and I hope that there can be common ground that is found in a very bipartisan way about the most important responsibility we have to protect and defend of the American people. That's our responsibility. I hope that they don't play politics with that, because this is deadly serious. And I do think that in the country there is no appetite for any boots on the ground except in limited circumstances, and that scope is the debate that we will be engaged in.
Other questions?
Madam Leader, Mr. Crowley, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the healthy skepticism, what topics, beyond questions, what topics?
Well, many of my colleagues in our caucus have been through this before, and not particularly this administration, but we've gone through two AUMFs. that have support from the caucus and some that have not enjoyed that support. So I think in terms of listening to the president about what the leader has said is probably the most serious issue we could ever discuss within our caucus, and that is the lives of Americans going overseas to protect our interests overseas, and what limitations will be there, and in effect, what ramifications from the limitations is also something that our colleagues want to talk about. So I think, as the leader has said and as the chairman has said, we're going to have an opportunity over these next few weeks to talk about that, have that healthy debate. And as the leader has also said, indicated, getting to a point in a piece of legislation that can help move our country forward in furtherance of protection of the United States.
Question?
Can you, there's obviously, as you've indicated, this language about enduring offensive combat operations, and many Democrats use vague. There's also been concern about the 2001 authorization not being addressed at all in this. Can you talk about the role that House Democrats might play in terms of trying to influence this debate? Might you try to unite in favor of certain core components that you would like to see attached to the language? And secondly, can you address the concern that obviously this would be a 3-year authorization, it would lead into the next president? How much the concern that while you might trust this president not to engage in an extensive ground campaign, that the concern of a next president, perhaps a Republican president doing that, is going to affect your thinking as you vote on this?
Well, starting with that, I would hope that the period of time of this legislation will be much longer than it takes to deal with ISIL. In other words, I don't want to be, we'll deal with them for 3 years and then we'll see how we'll deal with them after that. No, let's just get this job done. And let's do it in a way that supports, say, for example, the Jordanians and others who are at ground zero there, so that it's not calling upon our troops on the ground as was called upon before, but nonetheless in certain circumstances that there would be boots on the ground, whether it's rescue, whether it's defense of our embassies or whatever that happens to be. So the length of time in terms of another president, I'm more optimistic than that. I hope that we can have success as we pursue ISIL. In terms of the first part of it, just remember this. The 2001 authorization was an attempt to limit the power of the president because when attacked our country, all the restrictions of the War Powers Act were off. The president had any and all authority. It triggered all of the powers of the commander-in-chief. And that was very broad, and so that resolution was intended to narrow. It was still very broad, and it's still very broad. So I would think that one consideration might be, is when this 3-year sunset is there, that sunsets 01 as well. I don't see any reason, in fact, I actively support repealing the 2002 authorization. It was based on a false premise. I was proud that Democrats overwhelmingly voted against it. Nonetheless, it should go, and it should go now. The tactic of do you put it on this other authorization, that just is another complication. I believe the White House believes, let's do one, let's do the other, but let's make sure we do them both. But this is deadly serious. It's deadly serious, and we have to make sure that we do right by our men and women in uniform. As you know, yesterday was a congressional signing, and tomorrow there'll be a presidential signing of the Clay Hunt legislation. Just another manifestation of the serious harm that came to our young people who fought to protect our country, and that's one of the considerations that I don't think was considered enough when President Bush led us into the war in Iraq. Over 10 years later, here we are. And people were burned by that experience, burned individually in our country, burned legislatively, congressionally here for those who voted for it, and all of us concerned about it as we review what comes next.
Madam Leader, broadly on foreign policy, this Congress in the next month or so has to deal with Iran negotiations, whether it be more sanctions, whether arm the Ukrainians, obviously the AUMF. There's a lot of issues buffeting. How does this Congress, which is so fractured, between the parties, and how do they take on these massive responsibilities given the divisions that exist right now?
We take on those responsibilities in a bipartisan way. Issues that relate to our national security and foreign policy, which is part of our national security, of course, are issues that we have to find common ground on. The Ukraine issue is, as you saw with Chancellor Merkel's visit, one where there are decisions to be made, and we have people with a lot of experience and knowledge of the subjects over a period of time who can be useful in that discussion. I have always found and when it comes to foreign policy versus other issues, Congress is like a kaleidoscope. There might be one designed to talk about domestic policy, but when it comes to foreign policy, you turn the dial and different people come together to form a design, which is how we would go forward to protect. And it's based on so many things. Of course, values, knowledge, how we think, what plan we think will work, and responding to concerns from our constituents about their knowledge of, be it the Ukraine or other issues. When it comes to Iran, the president has us on a course. I commend the administration for bringing together the P5, the permanent 5 members of the Security Council, plus 1 Germany, to stay together in this negotiation. I think that sanctions that we've had so far and the multilateral sanctions that are there have helped keep Iran at the table. I think I'm pleased that the Senate has said they're not going to do any more sanctions to upset that delicate balance. I believe we've said no, everything's on the table, but for everything to be on the table, diplomacy seen to its full course has to be on the table as well. And so that's the path we're on, and I commend the administration for that. And we're eager to see if there can be a good agreement. If there can't, then we go to the next step. But I think that there's a real understanding of the seriousness. I mean, stopping the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction is a pillar of our security and our foreign policy, and it's as serious an issue as we deal with. Thank you all very much.